I was working the gates at Heathrow Airport in London when I saw this American man arguing with the security officer. He had liquid in his carry-on bag. The officer explained the rule. No liquids over 100 milliliters. That's the law at every airport in the world. The American looked confused and said, "But I need my shampoo. This is America's rule." He was standing in London. The officer said, "This is England, sir. You're not in America." The American said, "Yeah, but I'm American. My rules should work everywhere." He actually tried to walk through the gate with the bottle. He didn't get far. That's the weird thing about traveling. Some people think the world works like their home country does. Another time, I was in a coffee shop in Berlin. An American woman ordered her drink and asked for tap water. The waitress brought her a small bottle of sparkling water and charged her €2. The American freaked out. She said, "Water should be free. That's how it works." The waitress explained that in Germany, you pay for water. The American said the waitress was scamming tourists and refused to pay. She left a bad review online. But here's the thing. That's just how it works there. Water isn't free. It's a normal thing. When you travel, you follow the local system, not the other way around. I have a friend who went to Japan for the first time. He walked into a traditional restaurant wearing his shoes. The owner stopped him at the door and said, "Shoes off, please." My friend said, "Why? I wear shoes everywhere." The owner pointed to the sign. It was written in English and Japanese. "No shoes inside." My friend said, "That's stupid. My feet get cold." He literally sat at the table in his socks and complained about Japanese people being too strict. He couldn't enjoy the food because he was annoyed about a basic rule that exists in almost every traditional Japanese space. Then he went home and posted about how rude Japanese people were because they enforced their own customs. He made himself miserable by refusing to adapt. Here's what happens when Americans reject local rules. They lose respect, they stand out, and honestly, they make life harder for themselves. I've watched this pattern over and over. It's not about being American. It's about being stubborn. It's about thinking that the way you grew up is the only right way. This video is about stories where Americans refused to follow local rules. Some were funny, some were awkward, but all of them show what happens when you reject a culture's basic expectations. These aren't big political things. They're everyday moments. It's about tipping, quiet hours, cues, measurements, and basic respect. When you travel, the world doesn't change for you. You change for the world. Or you look ridiculous trying. Let me show you what I mean. I know a guy named Marcus who went to France for the first time. He was excited about Paris. Everything went fine until he went to a restaurant. In America, he was used to tipping 18 to 20%. It's automatic. You add it at the end. In France, tipping is different. Service is already included in the bill. You don't need to tip. It's not rude not to tip. It's just how their system works. Marcus didn't understand this. He left a small tip on the table. The server came running after him, thinking he forgot something. Marcus thought the server was confused. He said, "It's a tip. You can have it." The server said, "We don't need tips here. You've already paid for service." Marcus said, "Everyone tips in America. That's normal." The server said, "You're not in America." Marcus got defensive and said the server was being rude. He went back to his hotel and left a bad review about French service. But France's system isn't worse. It's just different. The prices are higher because service is included. Marcus refused to understand that rule and ended up angry at a server who was just doing his job. Another story happened in Germany. A girl named Sarah was staying with a host family in Munich. They had very specific quiet hours. From 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., noise needed to be minimal. It's not a rule the family made up. It's German law in many cities. Quiet hours exist so people can sleep without disruption. Sarah thought it was extreme. She was 22 years old and wanted to have friends over. At 11 p.m., she had 5 friends in her room listening to music and talking loudly. The host family came upstairs and asked her to be quiet. Sarah said, "We're just hanging out. It's not that loud." The host family said, "The law says quiet hours started an hour ago." Sarah said, "That's the most boring rule I've ever heard. In America, people hang out whenever they want." Her host family said she needed to respect their home and their country's rules. Sarah left the next day and told everyone that German people were uptight. But Germany has quiet hours because people value sleep and peace. Sarah refused to follow a basic rule and made everything uncomfortable. I have another friend, David, who traveled to the Netherlands. He rented a bike in Amsterdam, which is the main way people get around. He was riding and didn't stop at a red light. A cyclist behind him honked and shook his head. Then a police officer stopped him. The officer said that cyclists follow traffic lights just like cars. The rule is the same for everyone. David said, "It's just a bike. Nobody's coming." The officer explained that accidents happen when people ignore rules. David said, "In America, cyclists do whatever they want." The officer said, "Then you're in the Netherlands now, not America. And here you follow the law." David paid a small fine. He got angry about it online and said Dutch people were hostile to tourists. But that rule exists to keep people safe. It's not hostile. It's practical. Then there was Jessica in Thailand. She was at a temple, which is a sacred and peaceful place. There's a sign at the entrance that says visitors must cover their shoulders and knees. It's a basic rule of respect for the space. Jessica was wearing a tank top and shorts. A monk approached her and said she couldn't go inside. Jessica said, "Why? It's hot outside. This is how people dress in summer." The monk said, "This is a sacred place. We have rules about respect." Jessica said the rules were outdated and unfair. She went to social media and complained about how restrictive Buddhism is. But she missed the point completely. The temple isn't trying to control her. It's asking visitors to show respect. Jessica refused to follow a simple dress code and made herself upset over nothing. The pattern here is the same every time. Americans arrive somewhere with expectations based on American culture. When the local culture is different, some refuse to adapt. They see the local way as wrong instead of just different. They think their home country's logic is universal. It's not. I worked at a train station in Switzerland once. A man from Texas was confused about the schedule system. Swiss trains have very precise timing. They're rarely late. You buy a ticket for a specific time, and that's when the train leaves. Not 5 minutes later. Not 10 minutes. That exact time. The man missed his train by 1 minute. He said, "It should wait. Customers paid for tickets." The station master said, "The train leaves on time. That's how our system works." The Texas man said, "In America, trains wait a few minutes for people. That's customer service." The station master said, "We leave on time so everyone can plan their day. It's more respectful to passengers who arrive early." The man got angry and called it European arrogance. But Swiss punctuality isn't about being mean. It's about respect for time and planning. The rule exists for good reasons. He just didn't want to accept it. Another time, I heard about a woman in Italy who went to a hotel and didn't understand the shower system. European showers are different from American showers. They often have a handheld shower head and a small enclosure. The water stays in a contained area. There's no big shower curtain. She tried to use it like an American shower and flooded the bathroom. Water went everywhere. She called the front desk and said the shower was broken and terrible. The staff said the shower was fine. It's designed that way. She said, "American showers are better. You're doing it wrong here." But there's no right or wrong. It's just different. She refused to learn how to use it and blamed the hotel instead. What all these stories have in common is that people arrived with a fixed idea about how things should work. They refused to adapt. They saw difference as wrongness. And that's when they lost respect. Not because they were American, but because they were stubborn. Because they thought the world owed them familiarity. That's the mistake that keeps happening. I met a tourist in London. who didn't understand why you drive on the left side of the road. She was American and had never left the country before. She kept saying it was backwards. She said, "Why would anyone drive on the left? That makes no sense." A British person explained that left-side driving is used in many countries: the UK, Australia, India, and dozens of others. She said, "Well, America has it right. Left-side driving is confusing." She spent her whole trip complaining about this instead of just accepting it. She refused to see that different doesn't mean wrong. It just means different. I know a guy named Robert who went to Spain and got mad about dinner time. In Spain, people eat dinner late, like 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Robert wanted to eat at 6 p.m. like he did in America. He went to a restaurant at 6 p.m. and it was empty. The staff said dinner service didn't start until 9 p.m. Robert said, "That's insane. People need to eat earlier." The staff explained that Spanish culture has different meal times. That's how it's always been. Robert said the Spanish were wrong about food timing and that America had it figured out. He couldn't enjoy the culture because he refused to shift his schedule. He made himself miserable over something that wasn't his choice to control. I heard about a girl named Ashley who went to Mexico and didn't understand tipping culture. In America, tipping is 15 to 20%. In Mexico, tipping is different. It's not required like in America, but it's appreciated if you give 10 to 15%. Ashley thought Mexican tipping was rude because it was lower. She said, "In America we tip better. Mexican people don't value service." But that's not true. Mexican salaries are different. The cost of living is different. Tips work differently. Ashley refused to understand the context and judged Mexican culture as worse. She spread this idea to her friends, and none of them tipped well. They made assumptions about a country's values without understanding the actual system. I worked with a teacher named Kim, who traveled to South Korea. She was shocked by how direct Korean culture is. In meetings, people speak very frankly. They don't use a lot of soft language like Americans do. Kim said, "Korean people are rude. They don't have manners." But in Korean culture, being direct is actually a sign of respect. It means you're being honest. Kim saw directness as rudeness because she was used to American communication style. She refused to understand that different communication styles aren't better or worse. She made Korean co-workers feel bad by telling them they were rude. But they weren't rude. They were just speaking in their native style. Then there's the metric system story. I met an American man in Canada who couldn't understand why everything was in metric. He said, "Kilometers are stupid. Miles are better." He spent his whole road trip converting everything in his head. A Canadian friend said, "Why don't you just learn metric? Most of the world uses it." He said, "No way. American measurements are right." He refused to adapt to a system used by almost every country except America. He made his own trip harder by refusing a simple change in thinking. He had this weird pride about measurements, like America's system was morally superior. It's not. It's just different. A woman named Brenda went to France and didn't understand the store hours. In France, many shops close for lunch between 12 and 2 p.m. Stores also close earlier than American stores. They might close at 7 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. Brenda needed to buy something at 1 p.m. and couldn't find any open shops. She said, "This is bad business. How do stores expect to make money?" A French person explained that French people value work-life balance. Stores close so employees can have lunch and time with family. Brenda said, "In America, we keep stores open longer. That's good service. But the French aren't wrong. They choose different priorities." Brenda refused to see that her way wasn't the only way. She judged France's system as inferior when it was just different. I met a guy in Australia who got upset about the date format. Americans write dates as month, day, year. Australia writes them as day, month, year. He was confused and kept making mistakes. Instead of learning the local format, he complained that Australians were doing it wrong. He said, "Why would you write the day first? That makes no sense." An Australian explained that most of the world uses day, month, year. America is unusual. He said, "Well, America invented the internet, so we get to decide." That's not how it works. He refused to adapt to a local system and made himself frustrated for no reason. There's also the history thing. I knew an American who went to England and asked why there were so many old buildings. He said, "Don't you guys have modern stuff?" He seemed to think old meant bad. An English person said, "We like our history. These buildings are hundreds of years old." He said, "In America, we tear down old stuff and build new things. That's progress. But preserving history isn't backwards. It's a different value system." He saw American ways as progress and everything else as stuck in the past. He refused to appreciate that different cultures value different things. Another story is about a woman named Claire who went to Japan and was shocked by bathroom culture. In Japan, the toilet and bath are separate. You also remove your shoes in the bathroom. Claire said, "That's so weird. Bathrooms in America have everything together." A Japanese person explained that this design is very practical and common in Japan. Claire said, "American bathrooms are better because they're more convenient." But she was judging a system based on what she knew, not on actual logic. Japanese bathrooms work perfectly fine. They're just designed differently. I also know about a guy who went to Germany and got upset about the bread situation. German bakeries sell bread early in the morning. By afternoon, they're out of certain types. He said, "Why wouldn't you bake bread all day?" A baker explained that they bake fresh in the morning. That's the German tradition. It means you're always getting fresh bread. He said, "In America, we make bread once and sell it for days. It lasts longer. But the German way means higher quality." He refused to see that. He thought efficiency was better than freshness and judged Germany's system as worse. These stories all show the same pattern. People arrived with American expectations. When reality was different, they refused to adapt. They judged instead of understanding. They thought American ways were not just familiar, but actually better. That's the arrogance that makes people lose respect. I worked at a hotel in Vienna, Austria, and saw this incident that really stuck with me. An American couple checked in and immediately asked to change rooms because the shower had a handheld shower head instead of a fixed one. They said it was uncivilized. The front desk staff explained that this is standard in Austria and Europe. The couple said, "Well, we're used to better." They demanded a room with an American-style shower. The hotel didn't have one, so they left a bad review calling the hotel backwards. But they misunderstood completely. Austrian hotels are beautiful and well-designed. They have different showers because that's what works in their climate and design tradition. The couple refused to see this. They went home thinking Austria was inferior to America because of a shower. I have a friend, Marcus, who worked at a restaurant in Barcelona. An American man came in and wanted to change almost everything about his order. He asked for the salad without vegetables. He asked for the fish well done, almost burned. He asked for mayonnaise on everything. The chef was confused because the restaurant serves traditional Spanish food. The man said, "I want it the American way." My friend explained that the restaurant serves Spanish cuisine. They don't adapt it for individual preferences. The man said, "That's bad customer service. In America, we customize everything." He left angry and complained online that Spanish restaurants were stubborn and didn't care about customers. But Spanish restaurants aren't trying to be difficult. They serve food a specific way because that's their tradition and craft. The man refused to understand that different restaurants have different philosophies. Then there was a woman named Donna who went to Switzerland and got shocked by grocery store prices. Everything was expensive compared to America. She said, "Switzerland is too expensive. Nobody should live here." A Swiss person explained that Swiss wages are much higher, which is why prices are higher too. People afford it because they make more money. Donna said, "American prices are better." But it's not about better or worse. It's about different economic systems. Switzerland has different costs, wages, and taxes than America. Donna refused to understand the context. She judged the whole country based on not understanding economics. I met a guy in France who ordered a coffee and complained that the cup was small. French coffee comes in smaller servings than American coffee. It's stronger and meant to be sipped slowly. He said, "This is a rip-off. In America, coffee is huge." The server said, "This is how we serve coffee in France. It's traditional." He said, "Well, it's not enough." He demanded a bigger cup. The server couldn't give him one, so he left, complaining that France had tiny coffee cups. But French coffee culture is intentional. They value quality over quantity. He refused to appreciate that. He measured value by size instead of understanding the cultural intention. Another story involves a woman named Patricia who went to Thailand as a teacher. At the school, students bowed when greeting teachers. She thought this was creepy and too formal. She told them to stop. The principal said, "This is our cultural tradition. It shows respect." Patricia said, "In America, we're more casual. You don't need to bow." She refused to let students follow their own cultural practice. She was essentially saying that American informality was better than Thai formality. But Thai bowing isn't oppressive. It's a sign of respect. By refusing it, Patricia disrespected the entire culture. She made students uncomfortable about their own traditions. I know about a tourist in Italy who went to a small village and complained that there was no Wi-Fi in the restaurant. She said, "How do people live without Wi-Fi?" The restaurant owner said they liked keeping their space quiet and peaceful. She said, "That's impossible. Everyone needs Wi-Fi." She couldn't relax because she was disconnected. Instead of enjoying the peaceful village, she was frustrated. She refused to understand that some places choose simplicity. Her need for connectivity was so strong that she couldn't appreciate what the village offered. There's a story about a man named Tom who went to Japan and didn't understand the concept of removing shoes indoors. He walked through a traditional Japanese home with his shoes on. The host said, "Please remove your shoes." Tom said, "Why? I'm clean." The host explained that it's cultural. Inside spaces are separate from outside spaces. Tom said, "That's paranoid. Nobody needs to remove shoes." He refused and spent the whole visit in shoes, making the host very uncomfortable. He saw Japanese tradition as paranoia instead of understanding it as a cultural value about purity and spaces. His refusal to follow a simple request showed deep disrespect. I also heard about a woman who went to Germany and had a misunderstanding about public transportation. In Germany, you're expected to give up your seat for elderly people, pregnant women, or people with disabilities. It's a basic social rule. This woman sat in a priority seat even though an elderly man was standing. Another passenger said, "Please give up your seat." She said, "I'm tired too." "He can stand." She refused. The passenger explained that it's a German custom to help elderly people. She said, "In America, nobody cares. Everyone fends for themselves." But German society values taking care of vulnerable people. She refused this value and made herself look selfish. Her refusal said she didn't care about the elderly man. Another incident happened at a restaurant in Greece. An American man was sitting at an outdoor table at 9 p.m. The restaurant staff said they were closing at 11 p.m. He said, "Can't you stay open later for me? I'm a paying customer." The staff said they close at 11 p.m. every night. They go home to families. He said, "In America, restaurants stay open as late as customers want. You guys don't care about business." But Greek restaurants aren't trying to make less money. They have a culture that values time with family over work. He refused to see this. He thought American business values were better than Greek values. I also know about a girl who went to India and was shocked by the toilet system. Many traditional Indian toilets are squat toilets, not seated toilets. She said, "This is disgusting. How do people use this?" An Indian person explained that squat toilets are actually healthier and more efficient. They're used throughout Asia. She said, "American toilets are civilized." But there's nothing uncivilized about squat toilets. They're just different. She refused to understand that her way wasn't the only way. She made judgments about a whole continent based on not understanding a toilet. There's also the story of a man who went to Turkey and was offered tea at a business meeting. Turkish tea culture is important. You're supposed to drink tea and socialize before talking business. This man said, "Let's skip the tea and get to work." He saw the tea ritual as wasting time. The Turkish people thought he was rude. He said, "In America, we get straight to business." But Turkish culture values relationships. You build trust before dealing. His refusal to participate in tea time was essentially saying Turkish business culture was wrong. He lost respect because he wouldn't engage with their traditions. The common thread in all these stories is that people refused to participate in local customs. They saw their own way as not just familiar but correct. They measured everything against American standards. And when things were different, they refused to adapt. That's how you lose respect. Not by making mistakes, but by refusing to learn. These stories are everywhere. Travel forums, Reddit, personal accounts, Americans traveling abroad and refusing to follow local rules. And the weird part is that most of these situations were entirely avoidable. The person just needed to accept that the world works differently in different places. That's it. Simple acceptance. But something about traveling makes some people defensive. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's just never having to think about how different the world really is. When you live in America your whole life, American ways feel normal. They feel like the default. Then you leave and everything is weird. Some people lean into that. They try new things. They adapt. Those people have amazing trips and make friends everywhere they go. Other people fight it. They see difference as an attack. They think local rules are stupid or rude or backwards. They complain instead of learning. And honestly, you can feel the difference in their energy. Locals pick up on it. They sense that you think you're better, that you don't respect their way. And suddenly, you're not welcome. You don't get the friendly smile. You don't get the insider tips. You get treated like a customer instead of a guest. The thing is, most of the time, the rules that Americans reject aren't even that weird. Quiet hours at night? That's just about people sleeping. No shoes indoors? That's about keeping spaces clean. Tipping systems that work differently? That's just how they organize their economy. Metric instead of imperial? That's what makes sense in a global context. None of these things are crazy. They're just different. I've noticed that the Americans who struggle abroad are usually the ones who never questioned whether their way was the only way. They never had to. In America, you can live your whole life and never really encounter a fundamentally different system. Everything is designed around American logic, American measurements, American timing, American tipping culture, American portion sizes, American business hours. But the world is huge, and most of it doesn't work like America. Most of the world uses metric. Most countries have different tipping systems. Most cultures have quiet hours or different meal times. America isn't the default. It's just one way among many. The best travelers I've met are the ones who walk into a new place and say, "How does this work here?" They ask questions. They observe. They adapt. They don't judge. And because of that, people help them. People like them. They have real experiences instead of complaints. So, here's what I'm saying. If you travel, especially as an American, understand that the world doesn't work like home. And that's not a bad thing. That's the whole point. The differences are what makes traveling interesting. The differences are what makes you grow. But you have to be willing to accept them. You have to be willing to follow the local rules. Not because you're being controlled, but because you're a guest. And guests respect their hosts. Because at the end of the day, losing respect abroad isn't about being American. It's about being unwilling to learn. And that's something anyone from any country can do wrong. It just happens to be a pattern I've noticed with some Americans. Not all, but some. And maybe if more people understood that difference in the world isn't wrongness, travel would be less frustrating for everyone involved.